Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The People's View alongside my good friend Carl Seidel. And it's just Carl and I today because we kind of figured that there's so much going on at the State House that it gave us an opportunity to really focus on the issues up there. We said we want to give them updates anyways.
It's crossover time. We have to finish up all the House bills, and there's over 400 of them. And Pete, I can't believe we're going to debate 134 of those four, but that's going to be some fun up there.
Well, the good thing the Speaker did is install the time limit.
Right, very good.
I don't know why we don't do that all the time, because it just...
It goes much smoother.
Oh,
and
perfect.
if you can't say something in 5 minutes, you're not going to say it.
At all.
And there's some people there that just want to build up their own ego, and they'll talk for half an hour if you let them.
I can't... You know, we should probably talk in our little civics lesson. Why don't we start out with, what does crossover mean? Why don't we explain them what it means?
Well, crossover means that the House bills go to the Senate, and the Senate bills have to go over to the House. It's the time, it's a limit so that we actually have a time to discuss the other House's bills in time before the end of June. Because the end of June is the end of the session. And while we don't have a budget to do this year, we still have a lot of legislation to do.
See, I think what a lot of people understand, too, is the way that it works out is that you can, we'll call it death with dignity, is if you do vote for interim study this time of year, that means the bill's dead till the next session. So some of the people who maybe even presented the bill might not even be back again.
That's right.
So it gives everyone an opportunity to, you know, I don't know if I told you this, but last week I read to some of the kids at Fairground Elementary, and I got this book that said D for Democracy, and basically just took the alphabet in different parts, like C was Constitution, A was Amendment, but I was explaining to them the three parts of the government. And what Carl and I were talking about right here is that when we get a bill in the House, we have to pass it in the House, then we give it to the Senate. That's they have crossover along with us, just flop everything around. So we're going to start to see their bills. They don't have as many as we do because there's only 24 of them putting them in.
Versus 400 of us.
So, there's some people here that had like 40 some odd bills this year.
Is that? Well, you know, I have to give them credit. There's a lot of people, and I don't know what it's 140 are new people who.
147, I think.
147. Like it's a large number, and a lot of people ran on different platforms, and I think they all felt that they had to show their constituents that they listened to them, and so they put in bills. Not every one of those bills was as well thought out as it should be, and I think this year we've put more into interim study than we have in the past, or at least last time.
Yeah, that's the thing that's hard to explain to the viewers, but when Carl and I sit in committees and they come in and you're sitting there and the bill's being presented, it's very difficult if a bill's being presented that is not by the person who wrote the bill.
That's right.
Because they just have, you know, like I'm a big believer in this. When you have something in writing, that's why I don't really like communicating through emails. If you're trying to communicate a really important message, people can't hear the flexion in your voice in writing. They just read the black and white on the paper. And I think a lot of times a lot of the translation is lost. And I had a situation, judiciary, probably about a month ago. There was 5 bills one day that I introduced for other people that I had no idea what they were. And the reason was I sat at the end of the table. So I just was lucky to draw the lucky straw to get up to introduce a bill that I had no idea. So you have people there introducing a bill that there's no testimony on, that say, here's why we're doing it. And then you just, if there's people that came in to testify, you heard something, but no one asked questions. And, you know, I'm a big believer it's not so much quantity as it is quality.
That's true. And I think even the people who write the bills sometimes don't really understand the unintended consequences.
That's right.
And by having approximately 20 people review it in the committees, you do get a lot of different points of views, a lot of different perspectives that you might not get otherwise. And the lawyers that we have, I mean, we only have, what, 10 lawyers that have to write up all these bills for us? They don't understand where you're coming from sometimes. I know I had, in the first bill I wrote up, was a very complicated one, and I could not communicate what I wanted to do exactly to the lawyer, and I wound up just taking a wording of a bill that was written up and passed in Pennsylvania to put into our bill, and I wound up with a 20-page bill which nobody liked because it was just too wordy.
Well, there's one that I'm involved with this time too, and that's the same thing. Normally, that's what they do. If it's not something that's just an expansion of a New Hampshire law, they try to go to other states. That's how they research it and look it up and see how it pertains to them.
Yeah.
And you can't blame them. Again, that's the beauty of our system, and it's also the bad part of our system. We don't have secretaries and legislative aides and staff, and they serve 400 people. I don't even know how they do it, really.
Well, it gets kind of crazy. They need
sure.
a summer to recuperate from our bill sessions.
Well, Carl and I are going to kind of take you through what we call our calendar, and we're going to go through and pick out some of the bills. I know that we left off in Judiciary last week. We're going to wind up back in Judiciary. And a couple of them that are coming up, there's going to be some very controversial abortion bills that we'll be dealing with tomorrow. And one is HB 1659, which is relative to the woman's right to know regarding abortion information. There's 31 states right now that basically what they do is they have them watch a ultrasound of the child and have a 24-hour waiting period in which to make the decision, then afterwards to come back and have the abortion. And it's funny when you sit in Judiciary and you hear the two sides debate on what you can hear and how they represent it. It's just it's one of those things that we in Judiciary agreed that we were going to limit the debate on it because there's no way that our side is going to convince theirs and the other way around. And it's remarkable to me, the thing that astounds me with anything when it comes to abortion is how the people from the ACLU and the people that are really far to the left, it's fine to go ahead and kill a baby, but God forbid you want to kill a murderer and have the death penalty. I try to understand that. For the life of me, I don't get that. And they'll fight tooth and nail to prevent some serial rapist murderer. But, you know, an unborn doesn't matter.
Well, it's even getting worse if you saw what the ethics people over in England did just recently. Now they're claiming it's still ethical to kill a child after it was born if it was deformed. And, you know, it's just like it's a piece of machinery or a gadget that you manufacture and it turns no good, you throw it in the junk pile. That's a heck of a way to think about this.
It's like that saying how it goes, that sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
You see all these things like 1984 and those movies, and you know they're going toward things like that. And that's the part that gets me when I'm not a huge, it's kind of a cop-out for me, I guess, because I'm not a woman.
Yeah.
So it's not my conscience. You know, if you want, I wouldn't do it if I was a woman. But if that's what you want to do, you know, you're the one who's going to deal with it afterwards. But to see what they're doing when you destroy the moral fabric of a society,
right.
When you destroy family, when life becomes meaningless, that's when you lose everything.
Well, I think that's one of the things that's happening with our youth is they're seeing this, that life doesn't mean that much. And I think that leads to some of these other horrible things that have been happening in schools and afterwards. I mean, I think people are emotionally trained almost to not think of life as being important.
And there's no question that that's their design. The other abortion bill that's going to be very controversial and come up is the partial birth one, which is not quite as bad as what you described, but it's on the same notion that it's after I forget the amount of weeks, but it's when you enter the third trimester, basically, which I should know, but I don't know the week number. I don't want to misquote it. But we don't currently practice those in New Hampshire. That's their whole reason for not wanting this, but there's nothing to stop it either.
Right.
And,
And
that's horrific.
Well, I agree. It's a partial birth abortion is the best way of describing it, because the baby's 3/4 of the way out of the womb, and then they just kill it. And you know, what always bothered me is let the baby be completely delivered. What is the problem? What is that last?
Especially in today's day and age with adoption being so difficult, and I never understood that rationale behind it, but it's one of those things that you can't, again, this is my second term in judiciary, and when you see the two sides debate, it's like two different planets.
Well, you bring up adoption, which I'm very sensitive to, because my daughter just adopted a baby, and we had to go to Indiana, and we had to deal with a lawyer there, because he actually had helped write the laws of adoption in Indiana, which were very, very reasonable. And it's getting more and more difficult in some of these states to even adopt a baby. But even there, where it's supposedly easy, it took almost 3 years to go through the process, find somebody, and then wait for the baby to be born and able to take the baby home, essentially, with us right after it was born. It's a very moving thing. And for the people who give up the baby, it's a very, I think, loving moment that they have to give up something that they carried for 9 months, you know, to somebody else. But I think that's what people have to realize. These are human beings, just a little bit unborn.
And that's why they're so, the big left groups are dead set against the 1659, because it's going to humanize it.
Yes,
and you actually see
definitely.
that heart beating. And especially at some of the states that they're doing it. So I would say, to say the least, those are going to be some controversial moments at the State House the next couple of days. We had last week with the birth control.
Mm-hmm.
You heard that. See, that's the thing I always love to say. If that was a left-sided bill,
Yeah.
and there were people from Cornerstone, let's say, that were up in the gallery, that were doing what they did, that would be all over the front page of the paper. Channel 9 would have been playing it. They would have vilified everybody in there. He should have thrown him out for sure. They got a lot of leeway on that.
They did.
And then even at the end, they did their little...
You're talking about the cheering and things that the one side did when they thought they had, somebody was arguing for their point. I agree, and I think that's the handicap we're running into in this election, is that the media is framing these questions. And if they frame it their way, you have to really be aggressive to turn that frame around and say, look at it from this perspective. And that's what's happening with a lot of these bills. We've been condemned for having too much of a social program in some of our legislation, but many of the people ran on that in the last election.
As did I.
Yeah, I mean, I had a part of mine too. I don't believe in abortion, but and I would for bills like this. But I think that we also first took care of business on the budget and the economic issues, and we're still working on those. We still have to turn this state around as far as the income is concerned, so that we have better jobs and more companies that are coming in. But social issues are important too.
See, and I think one of the reasons why I wouldn't say I ran my campaign on it, I'm not good with money to begin with. I've said this several times. My wife keeps our checkbook, thank God, because it just burns a hole in my pocket. But I know when I talk to people, and I know what gets me motivated. And I think that sometimes when it comes to, when you start talking about billions, even millions, I think it just glazes people's eyes over.
Yeah.
They can relate to simple facts like this. So if they can see one thing that they can say, they can do a tangible thing. I talk about, obviously, our parental notification thing. That's a tangible thing they can say. They changed that law. They know what it means. There's no mumbo jumbo. They know that someone under 18 years old needs the permission of their parents to get an abortion now. It's pretty simple, pretty cut and dry. it doesn't mean that, you know, we saved $247 million on this and we put it on that, because I think a lot of people just lump all politicians in together anyways. You know, we got in this mess after a period of years, especially with the retirement system. Republicans were in charge during that.
Yeah.
When that was
Oh,
framed.
no. Yeah.
So I think that's probably some of the reasons why, but they're never going to talk about what you just said, that we really made sure that we didn't do anything socially other than parental notification till we got that budget fixed.
Right.
And the people who are paying attention know what's going on. And I don't know how you fight the media thing. But
Well, hopefully our show like this gives people a little bit more information, something else that they can use for discussion points with their neighbors, friends and neighbors. We do have to have more people getting involved and talking about it, because we affect a lot of people's lives with what we're doing up there. We realize that. And I think they have to understand why certain things are being done. If they hear only one side of an issue, that's no good. You got to hear both sides of it, and then make up your mind which is the right way to go.
Well, you know, going on, as a matter of fact, we were talking, Carl and I, off air, about Minnesota just passed the Senate a right-to-work bill. We have another one coming up, and you see how they spin that. We'll see, Carl and I will walk into the hall, and you'll get pamphlets and, you know, support working families.
Some of the piles of this stuff
Yeah,
that I brought along.
I mean, how do you say working families when the highest number I've heard in the state is 10% are union workers? So that means 90% of the people don't work? I would think it's the opposite. But that's the spin you get. Of course, you don't hear the other side on the media as to what that is. But for all you folks out home, you know, look around you in your neighborhood and see your neighbors, how many of them are in a union. And if there's 10 houses, probably only one house is. So that being said, you think there'd be more on the side of just one simple thing, allowing them to make a choice. And I was telling Carl off the air too, as I saw this morning in the news, that in Wisconsin they're trying to repeal the recall the governor. And they showed that since they passed that bill, the right-to-work bill, or their collective bargaining bill, they saved something like almost $500 million in negotiations with the teachers' unions and police and fire. So, again, do we want to see, you know, obviously everyone that has these professions that are, you know, supporting us in the community, everybody's all for that stuff. You just got to pay for it.
Well, I think that, you know, you have to look at it, in my mind, a very simplistic way. We're not trying to change collective bargaining. They can still collectively bargain. But if somebody doesn't want to be in the union, he shouldn't have to pay dues for it. He shouldn't be covered by what the union does either. And we tried to do that in the last legislation, and people had to change that around. I think this time the legislation's a little bit clearer. You know, they show that you keep your collective bargaining rights, and if more people than not in the bargaining unit are no longer members of the union, then they have to have another collective bargaining election to see whether they want collective bargaining by the union. I think that's only fair. And I think it's also a check on the union. The union could change. It has a monopoly, which I don't think many other people understand how monopolistic that is, because that is controlling and it causes problems. I feel that the management doesn't always deal with correctly, but they give in to demands that they shouldn't give in to, and that's how we get into some of these pension problems. But if the union loses people because of whatever action, then the union has to try to do better to respond to get more of those people back in. And there are unions. We had one fellow who's a member of the legislature who told us about the aircraft union, the pilots union. He says, you move in and out of that because of things that they do and they don't do. But that's the way they control they kept control of their union so that they didn't price themselves out of a job. I know my father belonged to a union many years ago, and they kept, every 3 years, they negotiated a contract that wasn't very good. They went on strike, never made back the money that they lost.
I never got.
And then the third time they did that, the company closed the shop and moved. And there was my father at 55 without a job. that's my circumstance. I think the unions have to get away from being a monopoly. And once then it's fair to all the workers that are in that bargaining unit.
Yeah, and you're never gonna, I don't know, I shouldn't say never, but it seems to me like it's almost impossible to get them to even bend.
Well, I think they're starting to bend. They're seeing that what happens, that there's a reaction, and that's why they're starting to pay more on their co-pays or whatever it is, their payment for the health care, and they're seeing that they have to do something to correct the cost, because they're also paying the taxes that the state gives to the schools to help on these pension plans.
That's why I don't know how they don't see that, because they are paying it.
That's right.
Taxes
They are. The taxes go up. I mean, and you can only tax people so much. What you want to do is have a thriving economy, so you have a broader tax base. You don't have to talk about increasing tax rates because the money is increasing because the base is broader. And I think that's the approach that we've been trying to take when we've been up there.
Well, I mean, we're certainly trying that. So now, what about you, Carl? What's some of the bills you wanted to go
Well,
over?
one of the big ones is the 10-year plan. Again, it's a question of money. Every 2 years, we come up with a plan of the next 10 years, what we're going to do for roads and bridges. And this includes rail and airports, too. I don't think people realize how broad that is. It's a 10-year plan. 2 years ago, we came up with 10 years of things to do with only 7 years of money. This year, we have 10 years plan with only 5 years of money. So basically, what we've done is divided it up in what we know we're going to get money for, and we still don't know what the federal contribution is. It's going to be between $100 and $150 million. And that's a big difference, and how you can do a lot. But we do have as priority completing Route 93 up to 293 in Manchester. To get that going and to finish it, because that not only is that a traffic jam, it's a safety hazard, and they wanted to do a lot of changes to that road to make it safer. And there are a number of other things that they're going to do, a few here in Nashua to broaden different roads, but they've been postponed as much as possible. So you have some that are on the list, but there's no money for them. So we'll just have to see where they go. But I think we're going to get agreement from the Senate on what we agreed to. Is the DOT, I think, is one of the better agencies up there when they're planning. They do a lot of meetings. They get a lot of feedback from the people, and they've gone through. It takes them a whole year to come up with their recommendations to us. And all we do is finally really tweak it a little bit and see where we can get more money. One of the controversial issues is the rail issue, which you know the executive board turned down. And again, I don't think people really understand why they turned it down. It was money, and it's not free money. It's money we give to Washington, they give back to us after they take 20% off. So one of the things was that it was too big. Nobody was going to buy a rail program all the way up to Concord. They might have bought something that stopped in Nashua just to see whether it would bring any kind of...
That was the first bill I voted on in 3 years that I can think of that I voted against my judgment, and I voted for overwhelmingly my constituents. And I think that a lot of them didn't know what in fairness to you, I mean, you voted against it, which that's the right vote. But I really tried to do what I felt I said I would do and try to represent the people who sent me there. And my thing, living where I live, on the border, almost all my neighbors commute. So it was really important to everybody. Now, the ones I could talk to and explain it to them, almost all of them would start to see it the way that you and I know it. But you don't see that in the paper. No. They don't say, look, this is a waste of money, and it's not going to happen. And everybody from the business people to, I mean, everyone, the chamber, they all wanted this thing. And for the life of me, there's not one railroad in the country that's in the black. That's right. From what I understand. You know more than me.
And that's part of the problem, too, is that all these railroads tracks are owned by different companies. They are in poor repair. And most of the money is going to be spent on fixing those rails. Even they tried to sell it now as far as business traffic as well as pedestrian traffic. And I think that right now going through Nashua is 5 miles an hour because the tracks are so bad. And we had that coal dump, what, 2 years ago, that they still haven't resolved fixing those rails. But I've talked to the mayor, and I think she knows where I'm coming from. I support an effort to try to get it to Nashua. And if you can justify it, and I think her idea of bringing Tingsboro in and the MBTA might find some kind of solution to bring it at least up to the Pheasant Lane area, have a station right around there. And if it works and they start, increasing the traffic, then maybe you take the next step, which is going to be expensive, bring it up to the airport or something like that, or maybe even the center of Manchester. But there's no, $4 million I'd rather spend on some of the roads and bridges. You saw how bad the bridges had to get before they actually took them down. We, as the part of the Public Works, went and saw that last year, that bridge, and I was afraid to walk on it, let alone let traffic go on it. And I think it was a good idea that they started to tear it down. And now they're finding out that the second bridge in there has to be changed too, because the piers are not broad enough to handle the new barges and ships that are going to come in. So in order to bring that to a first-class port, which they want it to be, we're going to have to spend more money on that bridge to be able to keep the shipyard open, because that bridge is very key to bringing stuff into the shipyard, and to open the port up for more of these world tankers that are bringing us goods in from other countries. So I think that there's better places to spend some of that money right now. And for the trail here, for the rail here in Nashua, we do that and prove that that has some viability before we go any further.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm against it. I think it'd be really cool to have a train that I can go hop on at the Pheasant Lane Mall and go to the Fenway.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with all the traffic and, just from a pleasure standpoint. You want to go out and have a good time down in downtown while driving your car in there and dealing with all that garbage.
I think that's good. I think the bus system that they've put into effect now, with a stop in Tingsboro and at Route 8, at Exit 8 in Nashua, is very good. I've taken that to the airport several times. It's a great way to go. It takes a little over an hour. And even I did once in the traffic, rush hour traffic, and it wasn't too bad, an hour and 15 minutes maybe. But the bus gets you into there, stops at the South Station and at the airport. I think it's under $20.
Well, maybe we'll just put a monorail in instead. Be like Disney World. What else is on the agenda?
Well, not too many other things right now, except coming up is the gay marriage bill, and that's going to be a controversial one. That's supposed to be at the end of the month. There's a lot of discussion on that. I think that, from my perspective, marriage is for a man and a woman, and a civil union is for any other combination of people who don't want to be considered married. I think for the legal aspects of marriage, the civil union allows people to form the same type of a relationship, so that there's shared property and stuff of that nature. And I think sometimes it's not just gays and lesbians you're talking about. Sometimes you're talking about brothers and sisters, or just maybe unrelated people who have now reached their latter years, and they want to live together for economic reasons, and they want to be able to share things themselves and be able to go to the hospital if one's sick, and go and see the person who's sick. There's a number of different things that you can do with the gay union thing that is broadly, but it's different from a man and a woman who have a marriage which protects their relationship and the relationship with their children. I think that's the most important part.
And it's such a generational issue that it's amazing that most of the kids really don't care about it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean anything to them. And then, when you do the statistics, I mean, most of the kids nowadays, if you're, born much after probably 1970, or maybe we can push to 1980. Almost all the kids come from divorced families anyways, over half of them. So they don't have a lot of respect for traditional marriage to begin with. And I think that that's part of what this is. And you know, all they do is, like the classic thing, is right off the bat, if you're opposed to gay marriage, you're a bigot. You're a homophobe.
Again, framing the argument their way.
That's how they do it.
Yeah.
And I do know, and I tell people this all the time, you know, it's not the song, it's the singer. When we had the real gay marriage debate was last time, before it got into this state. And as everyone knows, I'm pretty outspoken. I never had any hate mail. I said what I had to say. I said it in a dignified manner and just expressed my opinion, which hasn't changed. You know, life is not fair in general. You know, you can't just make everything better to go and appease everybody. And it is what it is. You can't just keep changing the definition because that's how you want to suit somebody at that time. And as you said, they have the civil unions. They have all the other things available to them. And the part that started to upset me the first time is, what about our rights? How do why don't our rights count?
Thousands of years of tradition just go down the drain.
It makes no sense to me. So you should just change everything. And you see, it doesn't stop there. You see it like in Connecticut, there was a town that banned keeping score in Little League because they didn't want the other side to be offended. I mean, the kids know anyways, right? They keep the score. They know what's going on. It's just, where does it stop? But you're going to hear the same thing again. We're going to hear the signs. I mean, I don't know if you were there. I think you were. We had a little rally about a month ago at the State House. And there was this woman showed up, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs. Again, I've been to, I don't even know how many Tea Party rallies and how many Republican rallies and different. I've never once been to where I heard them disrupting the speakers on the other side. And this woman screamed at the top of her lungs, "Why do you hate me? Why do you hate me?" Obviously, you know, she was for gay marriage, whether or not she was gay or straight, I don't know. But she just kept saying, I'm assuming she meant because she was gay, "Why do you hate me?" I don't remember anybody on our side ever giving a speech that we hate you.
Yeah.
It's just, it is tradition. It is how it was designed to be. Just common sense tells you that that's kind of how it was meant to be. That's how human race continues. But, you know, we're going to go through it. I have mixed feelings as to, I don't really have mixed feelings. I have, I'm not too optimistic that it's going to be repealed, and the biggest reason is some of our friends up there that claim to be Republicans but really are libertarians and free staters to the extreme that there should be no laws. So if you don't want someone to have a law to carry a gun, you sure as hell don't care if they're getting married. And I think it's unfortunate, but I think that if anybody learns a lesson out there, next time when you're vetting your people you're going to vote for, if someone does knock on your door, I've said this several times, I'll say it again, you should have at least 2 things, maybe 3 things that are important to you in this state, whatever it is. Ask the person you're thinking about voting for how they feel in those things. If they don't knock on your door, look up the candidates. Almost all of them will have a website, or they'll have an email you can get to them, or they'll have some way to contact them, and just say, you know, this is what's important to me, what's your stance on this? I don't think they'd lie to you. I think that they'll tell you the truth if you ask them. They may not volunteer the information, but if you ask, they'll tell you. And I think a lot of these people that went around, they ran as Republicans, but if they told the people that, look, my thing is no laws, I'm not sure how many votes they would have gotten, that being the case.
No, I agree with you there. I think that, well, we can use this forum too here to hear about what people out there think, or what questions they'd like us to address, or what guests would like to see us have. I think that most of our people did go around door knocking. I think that's how we turned aside. But also, we have a broader diversity, I think, in the Republican Party than the other party does. I mean, you can see it by the votes. Close. If you want to look, if anybody wants to look up the roll call votes, you can see how strict the other party is doing in keeping their
And we're
people
called
together.
the bullies.
Yeah, right.
It's amazing. If we're doing it, if O'Brien's doing such a good job bullying, how come we didn't pass right to work?
Right.
And how come we're gonna have a hard time with gay marriage?
Right.
And how come we have, on every single vote, we have 20, 30, 40 people that don't vote with us, and they'll have 0. There's not one, and for everyone listening out there, before it comes up again, when the governor vetoes the redistricting plan, which he's going to do, what this comes down to, which everyone should be aware of, we passed a bill that kept Nashua whole. Well, Manchester, it's almost Manchester against Nashua. Manchester's not happy with the bill. They're going to vote against it. That means the Democrats on their side are going to vote against it. So for everyone who's keeping tally, I believe it's 32 reps from Manchester, and we have 28 right now. So there's 6 of them are Democrats. All 6 of our Democrats, and you can look them up and call them, are going to vote against. They did already. They voted against the plan. So that it's already history. The plan's been approved. It went through the House. But when it comes back around for the veto vote, when he vetoes it, which supposedly he's going to do, if all 28 of our Nashuians vote against the 6 of the 28 vote against the plan, plus the 32 from Manchester, that's 40. That's going to put us above the veto proof, which I know all too well, going over right to work. I think it's 37 is our drop deadline.
Yeah.
So all of you people listening out there, call up your 6 Democratic reps and tell them that you want our city to stay as a whole, because what that means is they're either going to go to the plan we had initially, where they're going to take one of the wards, which is going to be Ward 3, which is even more crazy if you talk about bullying. There's 2 representatives right now in Ward 3 that would get moved into Hudson. But they're going to vote against it anyway to stick with their party. And we're the bullies. Or we're stuck with this thing, I don't know if you heard this one, Carl, where we're going to have, because we only have 26 reps technically, we're going to have 2 reps in each ward and then 8 floterials. How would you like to run for a citywide election for $100 a year? It's insane. So that's the things that we deal with that people don't realize. And you listeners should not let your reps get away with that. It's ridiculous. We have it's already there.
Yeah, we were able to convince that we have 3 reps per ward.
Per ward.
You'll have your chance of talking to your rep and getting your voice heard a lot better if you have your own rep. But if you have one that's citywide, I don't know how
and you people in Ward 3, if it goes to Hudson, you won't have a voice.
Yeah.
Because there'll be, I don't know, 13 of them to your 3.
I mean, the system is not perfect, and we did the best we could. We were fortunate to be able to keep 27 reps here in Nashua, and I think that everybody should be happy with that. We did not get a reasonable way of doing it from the Democrats. The Democrats didn't come up with anything.
No, they had the America Votes plan.
Oh, well, that was crazy,
which
too.
is, fractional. You definitely, my son says, when will I ever use algebra? Well, you use algebra to figure that plan out.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's about the only one.
Yeah. Well, I think we're reaching the end of our time period here, and I think we want to just remind people that the Nashua Republican City Committee is sponsoring this hour, and we do have meetings on the second Thursday at the Crown Plaza. Anybody's invited. We have a list of speakers. Our website is NashuaGOP.org, and you can see who speaks at each one of these and what the issues of the day, and a lot of different tie-ins to other parts of the agenda up in Concord, so that you can see and follow us what we're doing here. But please tune in and please let us know what you'd like to see as somebody that might be interviewed here, and we'll try to keep you informed about what's happening up there in Concord.
Tune in again next week for another episode of The People's View. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.